She was built to cheat a treaty, but she ended up rewriting the rules of naval warfare. To the enemy, she was a ghost story. A ship that fired so fast, battle-hardened Japanese admirals believed the Americans had invented an impossible 6-inch machine gun. To the United States Navy, she was the man-o'-war that kept the Marines alive on Guadalcanal when no one else could. But the legend of the USS Helena is more than just gunpowder. It is a story that moves from the inferno of Pearl Harbor to the shark-infested waters of the Slot. It is the story of a brilliant captain whose career was destroyed by an agonizing choice. It is the mystery of a ship that fought even after her back was broken, and the miracle of 165 men who refused to die. For 75 years, she lay lost in the crushing depths of Iron Bottom Sound. Today, we uncover the true story of the machine gun cruiser. To understand the fear, you have to understand the silence. It is October 1942, the Solomon Islands, the Slot. For the seasoned commanders of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the night is not something to be feared. It is their sanctuary. They have spent 20 years mastering the art of the nocturnal torpedo attack. They possess the finest optics in the world and the deadly Type 93 Long Lance torpedo, a weapon that leaves no wake and breaks keels at 20 miles. They own the darkness. Or, at least, they did. Tonight, looking through their binoculars across the ink-black water, Japanese officers are witnessing something that defies the logic of naval engineering. Reports are flooding into the flagship, frantic, stammering reports from the vanguard. These aren't the calm, disciplined updates of a standard engagement. They are the sounds of men witnessing a phenomenon. Ahead of them, an American light cruiser is unleashing a continuous, solid bar of neon light. There are no pauses for reloading. There is no rhythm of fire and adjust. It is simply a hose of liquid fire, stretching from the American line to the Japanese hulls. On the bridge of the enemy destroyers, panic sets in. The math is impossible. A 6-inch naval gun is a massive piece of industrial machinery. It requires men to hoist, ram, and lock heavy powder bags and steel shells. The fastest crews on Earth, even the Emperor's elite, can manage perhaps 6 to 8 rounds a minute. But this ship? This ship is throwing 1,500 shells in less than an hour. The blood drains from the faces of the Imperial admirals. As the steel rain shatters their superstructures, a terrifying realization takes hold. The Americans must have done the impossible. They have mechanized the cruiser. They have built a naval machine gun. They called her the machine gun cruiser, but on the Navy rolls, she was simply CL-50, the USS Helena. She wasn't a secret weapon born in a laboratory. She was born from a loophole. Back in the 1930s, the world was trying to legislate peace. The London Naval Treaty had put a chokehold on the world's navies, limiting the number of heavy cruisers and the size of their guns. The goal was to stop an arms race. But American designers at the Bureau of Construction and Repair looked at the fine print and saw an opportunity. If the treaty said they couldn't build bigger guns, they would simply build more of them, and they would make them faster than anything the world had ever seen. The design philosophy was radical. The Japanese were building ships for a decisive battle. One massive knockout punch with heavy guns and torpedoes. The Americans countered with the Brooklyn class, a philosophy of saturation. If you can't hit them with one big shell, hit them with 1,000 smaller ones. Smother them, blind them, drown them in steel. When the USS Helena was commissioned in September 1939, she was the ultimate realization of this philosophy. She packed 15 6-inch guns into 5 triple turrets. But the true weapon wasn't the steel, it was the mechanism inside. The gun houses of the Helena were factories of synchronized violence. They utilized a semi-fixed ammunition system and highly automated hoists, but the machine still required the man. The crew of the Helena didn't just drill, they evolved. They turned the interior of those turrets into a ballet of sweat and gears. They ignored the safety manuals that said 8 rounds a minute. They pushed for 10, then 12. They created a firing cycle so dense that, to the enemy watching from the receiving end, The individual muzzle flashes blended into a single, blinding beam of light. Consider the physics of that violence. 15 guns, 10 rounds per minute. That is 150 shells every 60 seconds. It is 19,500 pounds of high explosive and armor-piercing steel leaving the ship every minute. It was a rate of fire that didn't just damage enemy ships, it demoralized the men sailing them. Beneath the waterline, her 4 Parsons turbines churned out 100,000 horsepower, driving her 600-foot hull at 32 knots, faster than most destroyers. She was a predator, swift and lethal. After completing her shakedown cruise, she was transferred to Pearl Harbor in October 1940. For over a year, her 888-man crew drilled in the warm Hawaiian waters, perfecting the rhythm of gunfire that would soon become their trademark. She was the fastest gun in the Pacific. But as her crew would soon find out, being the deadliest ship in the water doesn't guarantee you'll float forever. War was coming, and it wouldn't start in the open ocean. It would start on a quiet Sunday morning, while the machine gun cruiser was fast asleep. The sun rises on December 7, 1941, painting the sky over Oahu in soft pastels. It is a morning of deceptive beauty. The air smells of salt and heavy fuel oil, mixed with the faint aroma of breakfast coffee wafting from the galleys. The USS Helena lies moored at Pearl Harbor's 1010 dock on Ford Island. It is a berth of prestige, usually reserved for the fleet flagship, the battleship USS Pennsylvania. But the battleship is in dry dock for maintenance, and so Helena has inadvertently taken the spot of a high-value target. Secured along her starboard side is the mine layer Oglala. She is a small, aging vessel, a relic of a bygone era that looks like a toy next to the sleek, modern lines of the cruiser. The morning is lazy. Sailors are reading papers. The chaplain is preparing for services. The giant is sleeping. At 7:57 a.m., the peace shatters. Signalman First Class C.A. Flood is standing watch. He spots aircraft approaching over Ford Island at 4,000 feet. Having recently served on the Asiatic Station, Flood knows the silhouettes of Japanese aircraft intimately. He freezes, his mind racing to catch up with his eyes. These aren't drill planes. He immediately alerts Ensign William W. Jones, the officer of the deck. Jones wastes no time. He slams his hand onto the general alarm. The klaxon screams through the ship, a harsh, rhythmic honking that snaps hundreds of men out of their morning routine. Jones grabs the 1MC microphone, his voice booming through the loudspeakers, cracking with urgency. "Japanese planes bombing Ford Island. Man all battle stations. Break out service ammunition." Within 3 minutes of the first bomb landing on Ford Island, a Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo bomber streaks low over the harbor waters. The pilot, focused on the massive silhouette at 1010 dock, believes he is lining up a run on the battleship Pennsylvania. He releases a specially modified Type 91 torpedo. Fitted with wooden fins to operate in the shallow waters of the harbor, the weapon runs true and deep. The torpedo streaks toward the 2 ships. It passes directly under the shallow keel of the Oglala and slams into Helena's starboard side at frame 75, nearly amidships, 18 feet below the waterline. The explosion is devastating. A geyser of water and heavy fuel oil erupts skyward, coating the decks and the men on them in a slick, blinding sludge. The blast tears through the armored belt, instantly flooding the forward engine room and boiler room. The shock wave severs heavy electrical cables, plunging the lower decks into terrified darkness. This is the moment where training fights panic. The blast has caught many crew members still racing to their battle stations. In the flooding compartments, the water is rising fast, mixing with oil to create a toxic, suffocating stew. Chief Water Tender Westbrook, realizing the ship is losing power, does not run for the ladder. Instead, he springs into action, wading through chest-deep water and oil in the pitch-black compartment to retrieve vital boiler parts. He is working by touch, holding his breath in the fumes, determined to keep the ship alive. In the plotting room, the brain of the ship, Electrical fires erupt as damaged circuits spark and arc. The room fills with acrid smoke. Damage control teams, coughing and blinded, fight back the flames with hand extinguishers, refusing to abandon their posts. Above decks, the Helena is wounded, but she is waking up. For the next hour and 20 minutes, her gunners pour out a volume of fire that defies belief. Her main 6-inch guns are useless against high-altitude aircraft, but her secondary batteries light up the sky. The crew fires approximately 375 rounds from the 5-inch guns, 3,000 rounds from the 1.1-inch anti-aircraft cannons, and 5,000 rounds from the 50-caliber machine guns. When magazine locks threaten to slow the ammunition supply, the crew doesn't wait for keys. They smash the locks open with sledgehammers. When the hoists lose power, they form human chains, passing heavy shells hand to hand from the depths of the ship to the firing decks, their muscles burning, their bodies slick with sweat and oil. Meanwhile, a tragedy unfolds alongside. The Oglala, her hull plates loosened by the massive concussion of the torpedo that hit Helena, begins to take on water. She is dying. As the mine layer begins to capsize, 3 Helena crew members dive into the oily, debris-filled water. They swim to the sinking ship to help handle her mooring lines, cutting her loose before her dead weight can roll Helena over or crush her superstructure. They swim back only as the Oglala rolls onto her side and sinks into the mud. Helena does not just fight for herself. She becomes the arsenal of the harbor. The battleship California, burning nearby, runs low on ammunition. Helena immediately begins sharing her reserves. 25,000 rounds of 50-caliber ammunition are passed over, along with belting machines and thousands of spare links. Her crew even runs ammunition to gun positions on nearby buildings in the Navy Yard. By the time the attack ends, Helena's anti-aircraft fire is so intense that several Japanese bomber formations are seen breaking off their attacks rather than face her barrage. She is officially credited with shooting down 6 enemy aircraft, more than any other ship at Pearl Harbor except the battleships. The cost is heavy. 26 men lost their lives in the initial torpedo blast, vaporized or drowned in the engine rooms. 5 more would later succumb to their wounds. The ship is sitting low in the water, a massive wound in her side. But Helena has survived. She has proven that rapid, accurate gunfire can turn the tide even in the face of a surprise attack. 2 days later, she is moved into dry dock number 2. Steel plates are welded over the massive torpedo hole. She is refloated on December 31st, but the Navy has bigger plans than simply patching her up. The Helena is about to evolve. The Helena that emerged from the Mare Island Naval Shipyard in June 1942 was a different beast from the one that had bled at Pearl Harbor. As shipwrights repaired her hull, technicians installed the most advanced technology the United States possessed, technology that was still top secret. Sprouting from her superstructure were strange, bed spring-like antennas. She had received the new SG Surface Search Radar, along with the SC Air Search Radar and the revolutionary Mark 8 Fire Control Radar. Before this moment, naval combat at night was a knife fight in a dark room. You fired at flashes, you fired at shadows, but these new systems meant that Helena no longer needed to see her enemy to kill them. She could track a ship through fog, rain, smoke, and total darkness. She had become a sniper, capable of fighting blindfolded. By October 1942, Helena is back in the South Pacific, prowling the waters of the Slot as part of Task Force 64. The battle for Guadalcanal is raging, a meat grinder campaign fought in the mud of the jungle and the waves of the ocean. The Japanese Navy controls the night, running high-speed supply convoys, the Tokyo Express, to reinforce their starving troops. On October 11th, American reconnaissance detects a major Japanese force moving south. Rear Admiral Aritomo Goto is leading 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers to bombard the U.S.-held Henderson Field. Rear Admiral Norman Scott moves to intercept with 4 cruisers and 5 destroyers. The stage is set for the Battle of Cape Esperance. But there is a fatal flaw in the American deployment. Admiral Scott has chosen the heavy cruiser San Francisco as his flagship, a ship that lacks the advanced SG radar. He places the radar-equipped Helena third in the line, effectively blinding his own command. The night is moonless and suffocating. At 11:25 p.m., inside Helena's Combat Information Center, the radar operators watch the ghost green blips appear on their scopes. Range: 27,700 yards, over 13 nautical miles away. They are tracking the Japanese fleet long before human eyes could ever pierce the gloom. As the range closes, the tension on Helena's bridge becomes unbearable. The crew tracks every movement of the enemy force, relaying the data, but Scott's flagship remains blind to the approaching danger. The Japanese are sailing straight into a trap, the classic crossing the T maneuver, but Scott hesitates, fearing the blips might be friendly destroyers. By 11:45 p.m., the Japanese ships are only 5,000 yards away. It is point-blank range for a naval engagement. Helena's lookouts can now physically see the silhouettes of the enemy hulls looming in the dark. Captain Gilbert Hoover, Helena's commanding officer, cannot wait any longer. He breaks radio silence to request permission to open fire, using the standard code interrogatory Roger, meaning, "Are we clear to act?" Scott, confused by the rapid tactical situation, replies, "Roger," intending only to acknowledge the receipt of the message. But Hoover interprets this as the command he has been waiting for. He turns to his gunnery officer. "Open fire." At 11:46 p.m., the machine gun cruiser unleashes hell. All 15 of Helena's 6-inch guns erupt in a blinding, simultaneous salvo, followed immediately by star shells from her 5-inch batteries to illuminate the targets. The Japanese are caught completely by surprise, their guns still trained fore and aft. The darkness explodes into a chaotic melee. Helena quickly shifts her fire between targets. Although her searchlight platform is wiped out in the first few minutes of battle by a stray shell, this actually works to her advantage. Officer William Jones later observed, "Whenever any ship turned on her searchlights, everybody shot at her. Since the Helena's searchlight platform was wiped out, we weren't tempted to use them." While other American ships illuminate themselves by turning on their lights, becoming perfect targets in return, Helena remains a dark phantom. She relies entirely on her revolutionary fire control radar. No visual point of aim is needed. The radar guides the guns, and the guns do the work. Her rapid-fire batteries find the heavy cruiser Furutaka. The Japanese ship shudders as dozens of 6-inch shells tear through her superstructure. The machine gun effect is devastating. The shells arrive so fast that the Japanese damage control teams cannot move. Furutaka is set ablaze, doomed to the bottom. The gunners then swivel their turrets to the destroyer Fubuki, dissecting the smaller ship with surgical precision. They also play a key role in crippling Admiral Goto's flagship, Aoba, killing the admiral on his own bridge. The victory at Cape Esperance provides a crucial morale boost for the U.S. Navy. But more importantly, it proves a concept. American technological innovation, radar-directed attacks combined with Helena's devastating rate of fire, can triumph over Japanese night-fighting expertise. The Helena has proven she can see in the dark. Now, she will have to prove she can survive a brawl. 1 month later, the stakes are raised. On the night of November 12, the Japanese launch an even more ambitious attempt to retake Henderson Field. This time, they are not sending cruisers. Vice Admiral Hiroaki Abe approaches with a bombardment force anchored by 2 fast battleships, Hiei and Kirishima. They are loaded with special fragmentation shells designed to shred every aircraft on the American runway. Standing in their way is a hastily assembled task force under Rear Admiral Daniel Callahan. It is a mismatch of suicidal proportions. Light cruisers and destroyers against battleships. And once again, command errors plague the Americans. Despite having 5 ships equipped with the revolutionary SG radar, Callahan chooses the San Francisco as his flagship, a ship still lacking the technology. He places Helena in the rear of the formation. At 1:24 a.m. on November 13th, Friday the 13th, Helena's radar operators detect the approaching Japanese force at a range of 27,100 yards. They watch the enemy close the distance, relaying data to the flagship. But the older radar on San Francisco fails to paint a clear picture. Callahan, essentially blind, sails his column straight into the Japanese formation. William Jones recalled the horror. "The Japanese came down in 3 columns, and we went between 2 of them. Once again, the fighting started at point-blank range because no ship knew where the hell they were except the Helena. At 1:48 a.m., the night rips apart. This is the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, a chaotic, close-quarters engagement that one officer described as a barroom brawl after the lights have been shot out. Ships pass within mere yards of each other, so close that sailors on deck can hear the shouts of the enemy crew. Torpedoes and main guns are fired at ranges so short they can't miss. In this confused melee, Helena becomes a whirlwind of violence. She initially engages the destroyer Akatsuki. Her gunners shoot out the Japanese vessel's searchlight, blinding her, before pouring concentrated fire into her hull until she explodes and sinks. Helena then turns to engage the destroyer Amatsukaze, scoring several hits before being forced to check fire when San Francisco drifts perilously between them. Next come the destroyers Asagumo, Murasame, and Samidare. Helena hits Murasame in a boiler room and sets Samidare on fire. As the 38-minute battle rages, burning ships drift through the formation like funeral pyres. The sound is deafening, a continuous roar of explosions and twisting steel. Through it all, Helena maneuvers through the carnage. Her radar gives Captain Hoover a clear picture of the tactical situation, while other ships fire blindly into the smoke. She emerges from the battle relatively unscathed, having taken only 5 hits that caused negligible damage and claimed the life of just 1 man. It is a miracle of navigation and gunnery. The U.S. Navy claims victory, but the cost is staggering. Both Admiral Callahan and Admiral Scott are dead. 2 light cruisers and 4 destroyers are sinking or wrecked. Helena's captain, Gilbert Hoover, finds himself the senior surviving officer of the shattered American force. At 2:26 a.m., Hoover orders the surviving ships to withdraw. Helena, San Francisco, and the light cruiser Juneau limp away from the battlefield. But the tragedy is not over. At 11 a.m., as the battered formation heads for safety, the Japanese submarine I-26 fires a spread of 3 torpedoes. They miss the San Francisco, but 1 torpedo strikes the Juneau. The Juneau is hit in her forward magazine. William Jones, standing on Helena's deck getting some fresh air, witnesses the horror. "I just happened to be standing outside. I saw her blow up. I didn't see the torpedo track, but she just went up like you see pictures of an atomic bomb explosion." The explosion is so violent that a massive 5-inch gun mount from Juneau sails through the air and splashes into the water on the far side of Helena. In seconds, the ship, and nearly 700 men, including the 5 Sullivan brothers, is gone. Captain Hoover faces an agonizing decision, one that every commander dreads. A Japanese submarine is in the area. His own ships are damaged. San Francisco is barely afloat. If he stops to search for survivors, he risks losing Helena and San Francisco, turning a tragedy into a catastrophe. Motivated by the need to preserve his ships and the thousands of men aboard them, he chooses to press on. He signals a passing B-17 bomber to report the sinking, trusting that rescue will come. The message is lost in the bureaucracy. Rescue ships do not arrive for 8 days. Of the nearly 700 men on Juneau, only 10 survive the exposure and sharks. Admiral Halsey later relieves Hoover of command for the failure to rescue the men, a controversial end to the career of a brilliant tactician. Hoover had saved his ships, but the weight of the Juneau would haunt him forever. But Helena sails on, now carrying the weight of the ghosts she left behind. By July 1943, the Allied forces are moving up the Solomon chain. Helena, now under the command of Captain Charles Cecil, is the veteran heavyweight of the fleet. She has fired more rounds in combat than any other ship in U.S. Navy history. Her crew feels invincible. On the night of July 5th, she joins a task force to intercept another Tokyo Express run in Kula Gulf. At 1:57 a.m. on July 6th, the American vessels unleash their radar-directed fire. Helena, St. Louis, and Honolulu pour out nearly 1,500 shells in just 5 minutes. Helena accounts for nearly half that volume. But there is a fatal problem. In a heavy bombardment the previous night, Helena expended her supply of flashless propellant. Now, firing standard smokeless powder, each salvo creates a massive muzzle flash that lights up the ship like a beacon. In the pitch black of Kula Gulf, she is painting a target on her own back. Observers describe it as liquid fire squirting from a hose. The Japanese destroyers, battered but dangerous, see the light. They launch their long lance torpedoes at the flashing target. At 2:03 a.m., 3 torpedoes find their mark. The first strikes Helena near the bow, shearing it off completely. The blast is so violent it tears the hull open nearly to the keel. But even with her bow severed, Helena's forward guns continue firing, a testament to her crew's discipline. They fight until the deck literally disintegrates beneath their feet. 2 minutes later, the second and third torpedoes strike amidships, smashing into the machinery spaces. The keel snaps. The ship jackknifes. The machine gun cruiser is dead. As the crew abandon ship, the hull breaks apart. The center section sinks quickly, but the bow remains afloat, pointing skyward in the darkness. Hours later, the destroyer Radford illuminates the wreckage. When asked to identify the debris, the captain's voice cracks over the radio. "I'm sorry to report, it is 5-0. Nearly 1,000 men are in the water. The fleet, forced to withdraw to avoid dawn airstrikes, rescues many, but hundreds are left behind." What follows is one of the great survival stories of the war. Some men cling to the floating bow until it sinks. Others drift on life rafts. The currents carry them to the island of Vella Lavella, Japanese-occupied territory. 165 survivors wash ashore, starving, exhausted, and weaponless. They are deep behind enemy lines. Discovery means execution. But they find allies. Solomon Islanders, acting as scouts and coast watchers, spot the Americans. These men, risking their lives and the safety of their villages, choose to help. They hide the sailors in the jungle, covering their tracks. They feed them coconuts and yams, tend their wounds, and guide them to secret camps deep in the interior. For over a week, a deadly game of cat and mouse plays out in the jungle. Japanese patrols scour the beaches, looking for the Americans. The survivors move silently, communicated in whispers, guided by the locals who know every leaf and stone of the island. A daring rescue mission is hatched. On the night of July 15th, a flotilla of destroyers and transports races to Vella Lavella under the nose of the Japanese garrison. Guided by signals flashed from the beach, Higgins boats rush through the surf. It is a moment of pure tension. The Japanese are miles away. If a shot is fired, the rescue could turn into a massacre. But the operation is flawless. Every single one of the 165 survivors is evacuated. They are brought back to Tulagi, reuniting with the shipmates plucked from the water on the night of the sinking. The Helena was gone, but her legend was cemented. She was a technological marvel, a lethal killer, and a savior to the fleet. She fought in the fiercest battles of the Pacific, broke the back of the enemy's night superiority, and sacrificed herself to hold the line. For 75 years, she lay in the deep dark of Iron Bottom Sound, a silent sentinel in a graveyard of ships. In 2018, the research vessel Petrel finally located her wreck. Lying at 2,820 feet, her hull number, 50, is still clearly visible on the stern. In Helena, Montana, a memorial stands. It bears the names of the lost and an inscription that defines the spirit of the crew who turned a light cruiser into a legend. They are still Helena men, always will be.